Welcome to the special edition of Alone. No script, no cameraman, only 10 specific tools allowed. The prize remains $500,000. Rules are largely unchanged, except for the winning conditions and the start time. Previously, the last person standing won. This time, surviving 50 days suffices. Remember Roland from Season 7? He bagged a musk ox and won $1 million. Arguably the most thrilling season of Alone. While focusing on Roland, we overlooked other strong contestants, like Mark, the Special Forces soldier who dared to hunt bears, Callie, the longest surviving female contestant, and Amos, the fish king cornered by wolves. Any of these contestants could have won in any other season. To address this, officials will select 6 contestants from past seasons for a wilderness solo survival spin-off. Previously, the competition started just before winter. This time, it starts in the harsh winter, making survival significantly harder. The challenge is set in the Labrador tundra, where the biggest challenge isn't hunger. There are rabbits, grouse on land, and various fish, shellfish, and algae in the sea. Local laws even allow polar bear hunting, provided you're prepared to be hunted by them. Mark is a reconnaissance sniper, who lasted 44 days in Season 7. His fish were plentiful and large, and he built the largest wilderness mansion ever. If not for a parasitic infection and bear raids on his fish, he could have lasted until the end. 2 years later, his health restored, he's back for redemption and the hefty prize, though this time, his landing spot isn't ideal, mostly swamp except for the beach. To survive the winter, he must find a dry high point. His desire to hunt bears is strong, but he plans to play it safer this time, focusing on steady development before hunting aggressively. Next up is Callie, dubbed the strongest female contestant. Without fishing nets, she caught dozens of rabbits with traps and hunted 2 large capybaras with a bow and arrow. She lasted 89 days in Season 7. If not for Roland's musk ox kill and her severe frostbite, she might have won the $1 million. After 2 years, her frostbite has healed, and she's been honing her survival skills while herding. Now, she's determined to reclaim what's hers. Upon landing, Callie quickly assessed the terrain. Her position was on the shadowed side, where temperatures are consistently below 0. She needed to move to a sunnier, wind-sheltered area. But shortly after setting out, she spotted a clear animal trail, followed by bear tracks. Labrador reportedly has 10,000 black bears, meaning they could be anywhere. If a contestant could take one down, the $500,000 would be theirs. Bear meat, similar in protein to chicken but 8 times fattier, is a rare survival resource. Amos is also tough, surviving 58 days with a gill net and claiming hundreds of pounds of fish before wolves raided. As temperatures fell and ice formed, his net's returns diminished. Though he managed some game, hunger and loneliness overcame him in the end, and he accidentally burned down his camp. Spending time growing with his daughter made him realize how enticing the prize was. To provide a better life for his child, Amos re-entered the survival battle. Temperatures plummet after sunset, so he had to quickly set up a temporary tent for the night. Perhaps due to his experience with wolves, he was cautious about choosing a campsite this time. He decided to survey the area carefully the next day before establishing a permanent shelter. To fend off the cold and predators, Amos built a fire early on, joking that this time his tent was safe. Nothing like the last incident. Mark glanced at the temporary tent, commenting that it was just a stopgap. He planned to quickly build a wilderness mansion, possibly even more elaborate than in Season 7, to better withstand the wild. Today is the second day of the survival challenge. Amos woke up just in time for low tide and quickly gathered a pot full of clams, a feast in previous seasons, but he aims higher. Much of the area remains unexplored, and it's time to survey the environment. Amos, bow in hand, searched for game while scouting for a permanent shelter site and made a discovery. He drew his bow, certain of his shot at this distance, but the grouse flew away with his arrow. Chasing it only led to finding feathers. Continuing would be fruitless. The energy spent isn't worth the chicken's calories, but losing one of his limited arrows hurts more. Now, he decides to focus on building a shelter. Labrador's weather is notoriously fickle, with up to 4 meters of snow annually, plus the cold damp from the wind and water. He chooses a depression among rocks for his shelter, using a classic A-frame structure for stability and warmth. Meanwhile, Callie was woken early by squirrels. She headed to the beach to gather resources and start on her permanent shelter. She quickly found a wooden board, ideal for chopping vegetables, and further along the beach, she collected a dead tree and some nylon rope, perfect for her shelter. She chose a sheltered, open area between two trees, using one as a structural post and a log as a crossbeam, then covered it with a tarp for the main structure. The details would be perfected later. Now, she needed to find food. The low tide offered plenty of seaweed and clams for a meal, but a flock of crows at the shore caught her attention. They were feasting on something unbelievable, a seal skin, rich in high-calorie fat. Callie washed it in the water. It was still fresh, possibly leftovers from a killer whale, given her morning whale sighting. Seal fat, a valuable survival resource, turned her scavenging into a miraculous start. No one would choose seaweed over a pot of rich soup made from this rare find.
That I'm going to be able to find everything I need in.
Seal fat soup, that's what's for dinner tonight.
Whoa, that is pure fat.
On day 4 of the challenge, it was time for Amos to check the traps he had set. He always took his bow on these trips, maximizing his physical effort in case the traps were empty. Today, however, his traps were successful, as indicated by his excited shouts. Starting with either snowshoe hares or seal skin, clams and seaweed seemed hardly worth mentioning. Amos cleaned a rabbit and soon had a pot full of stew. Even without spices or sides, it was incredibly satisfying. By day 5, Mark was struggling with his drop point, bogged down by swamps and water everywhere. He finally found some high ground, but clearing it took effort. He planned a grand wilderness mansion, requiring logs, a challenging and time-consuming material to gather. While working, he missed his son so much that he unexpectedly pulled out his phone. It seemed like a joke at first, but then he chose to quit the competition. The rescue team arrived confused. The legendary contestant lasted only 5 days. Some might suspect this was scripted, but I think Mark saw the writing on the wall as soon as he realized the poor quality of his location. Leaving directly seemed implausible, so he decided to film some footage before exiting, as the scale of his shelter suggested it was never meant to be completed. Junia lasted 73 days in Season 6. Though her hunting skills were somewhat inferior to the male contestants, she had more body fat and excelled in snare traps, keeping a steady supply of rabbit meat from the start of the season until winter. She even made a scarf from rabbit skins. However, as the Arctic temperature dropped, her trap yield dwindled, and she was forced to eat rabbit organs. Eventually, when land resources dwindled and the lake froze over, Junia tried to fish through the ice but lacked an axe, making her folding saw ineffective. Severe malnutrition led to her disqualification by the medical team, and she was sent home. Since then, she's been preparing for new challenges and eagerly awaited her chance to return and reclaim the $500,000 prize. The location she drew this time is promising, with plentiful beach vegetation. She found a plastic bottle perfect for a water bottle and spotted abundant scallops and seaweed. However, her immediate task was not foraging, but securing a safe spot and setting up a temporary tent before dark, as some contestants arrived in the evening. Michelle, a tough competitor from Season 8, had a short but intense experience. Starting with crickets and roots, she accidentally poisoned herself but managed to detox with charcoal. She attempted to make a fish trap, but it was less fruitful than expected, losing significant weight in just 21 days. She even resorted to consuming her own bodily fluids for salt. Ultimately, she left the challenge due to a lack of meat. After honing her survival skills at home, she returned, determined to prove her skills, especially with the bow. The location she drew reminds her of her coastal hometown, where she can easily dig up large clams on the beach. Greg, a veteran from Season 3, survived 51 days and is known for his love of the wilderness. He once competed with a fox over food, leading to him eating plants when he couldn't catch the fox. Eventually, he built a boat, which improved his fishing success. However, he had to leave the competition after falling into the water and suffering hypothermia. Now 59, he's back, undeterred by the dangers and ready to compete. Upon landing, with only 2 hours until dark, he quickly set up a temporary tent between large trees, hoping it might offer some protection against polar bears. While collecting firewood, he found bear droppings and realized a male polar bear might be nearby, weighing around 1,400 pounds. As night approached, Junia was still setting up her tent. She focused on insulation, laying a waterproof sheet on the ground to prevent her sleeping bag from touching the cold earth. She spent her first night under the aurora, determined to improve her temporary shelter. Michelle spent last night without setting up a tent, hoping to view the aurora directly upon waking. Today, she needs to find a place to build a shelter, or she might be driven away by the rain. After searching the forest for a while, she found plenty of bear droppings, but no suitable campsite. She decided to camp near the beach for its open view and safety. With previous shelter-building experience, she focused on warmth and sturdiness, conserving her energy for hunting. However, while working, she heard strange noises nearby. Investigating, she prepared for the possibility of encountering a black or polar bear, but it turned out to be just the sound of waves hitting rocks, not the danger she anticipated. On the survival challenge's second day, Greg hadn't eaten since landing. He decided to gather seafood, finding plenty of shellfish and seaweed on the shore after the tide went out. Although he collected a lot of mussels, he needed more substantial food. He showed off his fishing skills, confident with a mussel-baited hook, but ended up snagging seaweed instead of fish. He thought he could manage with boiled mussels, but then realized he couldn't find his pot. After retracing his steps and reviewing the camera footage, he found it lying on the beach, much to his relief. On the third day, Wonia, noticing worsening weather, decided to quickly build a permanent shelter. She chose a site next to a rock, using it as a natural barrier, which saved materials while providing good insulation and stability. Despite the wind and rain, she continued to scrape bark to protect her tarp and prevent long-term smoke damage from fire. After constructing a frame with 2 tripods and a crossbeam between the rock wall and the frame, her wilderness mansion was structurally complete. She covered it with a tarp and filled gaps with branches, making it habitable for now, with further improvements planned. Back to Greg, he thought his canvas was waterproof, but it leaked during the rain. His sleeping bag was soaked, and he needed to dry it quickly to survive the night. Using a waterproof sheet from his camera gear as a makeshift roof, he worked through the rain, cold, wet, and hungry, reminiscent of his third-season ordeal that ended in hypothermia. To avoid a repeat, he quickly started a fire to warm up, but the sleeping bag remained damp throughout the night. He decided to focus on food first, making a breakfast of spruce needles and mussels, and planned to set traps on the shore to catch a seagull for better nourishment. On the 5th day, Greg's sleeping bag was still not dry, and he was fed up with mussels. Checking his traps, he found they had been triggered but caught nothing, wasting a day and causing his frustration to spike. Neither fishing nor trapping was successful, leaving him nearly breathless with irritation. On the 6th day, Michelle also faced problems, possibly food poisoning, feeling weak and nauseous. She intended to collect dry wood, but couldn't go far before experiencing stomach pains and sweating heavily. She had no choice but to return and rest, drinking tea to alleviate her symptoms. Winia is also facing challenges. Her newly built shelter has started leaking, and her waterproof tarp has worn holes. Upon checking, she found the roof full of water. Though this season features veteran contestants known for their resilience, surprisingly, within just a week, many are experiencing physical and mental issues. Perhaps the harsh environment or their body's slow adjustment is to blame. Once they adapt, they should be able to demonstrate their true capabilities. Callie has set her sights on a seal. A successful hunt at this point could secure her survival for 50 days. Unfortunately, the seal sensed danger and fled before she could even draw her bow. Now she must rely on foraging from the sea, where the tide reveals a variety of shellfish, providing essential, albeit limited protein. Certainly better than going hungry. Combined with fat rendered from seal skin and some seaweed for vitamins, this should meet her nutritional needs temporarily.
Lunch is served.
That would be a really great fact to have in the bottom of the screen. How many mussel bites does it take to equal a pound?
However, for a 50-day survival and to claim the prize, she would do well to aim for a more comprehensive approach, perhaps taking down a large animal. Michelle's progress is more promising. Her permanent shelter is nearly complete. She had a slight food poisoning scare a couple of days ago, but has recovered after a severe bout. Now, it's time to utilize her hunting skills. Not far along the coastline, a ptarmigan practically delivered itself to her door. To increase her chances of a successful shot, Michelle used whistling to lure it closer to her shelter. When it finally paused, she took her shot, successfully killing it. her first kill in the competition, and the season's first chicken dinner. Michelle was thrilled, yet somewhat shy about her success. She quickly processed the ptarmigan, started a fire, and added some berries to the pot, making her meal even more satisfying. Turning to Amos, his lack of dry wood stored before the rain has made starting a fire extremely difficult. Learning from this oversight, he's paused foraging to prioritize woodcutting. He found a perfect piece of driftwood on the shore but couldn't drag it back whole, so he cut it into manageable pieces. After hauling the wood back to camp in 2 trips, he needed to split it for storage. This task should have been straightforward, but a misplaced axe swing nearly injured his leg, giving him a real scare. Shaken, Amos decided filling his stomach was more urgent than ever. On the 7th day at dawn, Juania accidentally triggered her bear spray, not due to wolves or black bears, but because she mistakenly hit the spray button. Her clothes and sleeping bag were soaked with pepper spray, making her feel as if she were on fire when she woke up. Her shelter seemed buffed, deterring any wildlife within 100 meters. Today she had to clean her clothes, using clay's strong adsorption properties to neutralize the pepper spray with some vigorous rubbing. Back to Callie, she spotted a ptarmigan while fetching water, but regretfully hadn't brought her bow. Deciding to try her luck, she returned to the spot, but the bird had gone. She searched the area, confident it hadn't gone far. After all, ptarmigan would be a tastier meal than mussels. However, after finding the bird again and taking a shot, she ended up scaring it away, and worse, her arrow flew into the sea. Given the importance of arrows, contestants only have 9, and the cold water temperature of just 2 degrees, Callie risked retrieving it to avoid a repeat of her previous frostbite experience. She hurried back to camp to warm up and prevent further injury. Meanwhile, Greg simply couldn't endure any longer. While others managed on mussels and seaweed, he struggled after just a few days. Continued fishing and an empty trap on the first day should not have been demoralizing, yet perhaps he shared Mark's sentiment that it was better to quit early if there was no hope. With Mark and Greg's departure, only 1 man and 3 women remain. Amos now has to step up if he doesn't want to fall short as well. The first female champion might soon be crowned, like the proactive and optimistic Juania. Although she's nearly sick of mussels and seaweed, she continues foraging at low tide. Today, with the tide at its lowest, she might discover new species. While others worry about food, Juania has already started storing it. She knows that relying solely on foraging, fishing, and hunting won't suffice for 50 days, especially once everything is covered in snow and ice, making food scarce. Now, while mussels are still abundant, she pens them in the shallow waters near the shore for easy access to fresh food whenever needed. She's already collected dozens of pounds, and if her hunting yields further, winning the $500,000 should be within reach. Amos, on the other hand, is struggling. It's only been 8 days, and he's constantly hungry. It's puzzling why the male contestants aren't taking advantage of the abundant food available after the tide, focusing instead on fishing and hunting, which are less reliable this season as fish move to deeper waters before winter. Amos, undeterred, tried fishing for hours by the river, but caught nothing. Considering his situation, he decides to take a risk and hunt a black bear at dawn. The next day, armed and ready, he ventures into the woods, setting snares along the way to conserve energy. Fortunately, he finds a trail leading to a bear bed, surrounded by fresh bear droppings and scraps from small animals, suggesting recent activity. Switching to a more suitable arrow, he cautiously proceeds and unexpectedly finds not a bear, but a larger snow hare than before. Starving, Amos postpones his bear hunting plans to prioritize eating. Even without sides or seasoning, a simple meat soup sustains him for another week. Meanwhile, Michelle is awake before dawn, disturbed by the noisy flapping of her tarp in the wind, which also risks tearing it. So, she decides to reinforce her shelter today, planning to frame the outer layer and pack it with moss. This not only secures the tarp from the wind, but also enhances insulation. After this significant upgrade, her shelter becomes the strongest on the field. As long as she can maintain a stable food supply, she should easily withstand the winter for 50 days. Callie has been absent from the camera for the last 2 days, dealing with her menstrual period and resting at home. Today, she's determined to get food, realizing from her missed opportunity with the ptarmigan that relying solely on active hunting isn't effective. She sets up a passive trap, constructing a conical structure with a tree trunk at the center, surrounded by sticks, secured at the top with rope, and camouflaged with cedar needles. She calls it the Ptarmigan Terminator 2000, baiting it with raspberries and beach grass. If a ptarmigan dares to steal the bait, it will find itself trapped in a tight space, unable to escape. On the 10th day, Wanya faces another heavy rain. Previously, it was just the roof tarp leaking, but now the rock wall leaks too, soaking her sleeping bag. Fortunately, the rain doesn't last long, and a rainbow appears the next morning. To prevent her shelter from becoming a death trap, Wanya starts collecting materials to repair the roof, thinking Michelle was wise to have reinforced her shelter early. Wanya works from morning to afternoon, gathering planks and cedar. She uses the branches to patch the walls and keeps the scraps for firewood. After a full day's repair, she's confident the leaks are fixed. Completing her tasks, Wanya can't help but sing joyfully, content with her fortified shelter. Today is day 12 of the challenge. Michelle woke up hungry before dawn. To diversify her food sources, land, sea, and air, she plans to make fishing gear and try her luck fishing, despite Labrador being in the thick of winter. Before fishing, she checks her traps, hoping for a rabbit or squirrel, but finds nothing. As she was about to find a spot to fish, she stumbled upon a large, black bird lying on the ground, seemingly fresh, though the cause of death was unknown. After dissecting and finding no parasites, Michelle decides to stew the bird. Surprisingly, the stewed bird turned out to be delicious, giving her a good meal before fishing. Over at Wanya's camp, she noticed rabbits nearby in the last 2 days and plans to set traps in the forest. Before that, she unraveled some yarn from a sweater she had custom-made before the competition, which did not count towards her 10-item tool limit. This effectively gave her an extra tool, useful for both warmth and crafting. Wanya set traps along the rabbits' frequent paths and tied the unraveled yarn to treetops to save time and energy when checking traps later. Besides food and shelter, Wanya also keeps up with personal hygiene, washing her clothes weekly to avoid infections. After sunset, she went to check her traps, finding them all empty until the last one, which finally yielded a rabbit. Relieved, she quickly prepared it for dinner, using the organs as bait and eating the rest. Day 13 brings new hopes and challenges. Callie's snares set 2 days ago are due for checking. On her way, she tasted some ice from the frozen sea, finding it crispy and salty like chips, but still prefers the taste of rabbit and ptarmigan. With high hopes, she checked her traps, only to find them empty, including her ptarmigan trap, which left her feeling devastated and tearful. Meanwhile, Amos's goal today remains bear hunting, keeping an eye out while checking his traps. In the woods, he found a ptarmigan caught in a tree branch, likely one he shot earlier. The bird was inedible but useful as bear bait. Just as he was feeling regretful, another ptarmigan appeared, which he successfully shot with a blunt arrow, preventing it from flying away. His strategy to hunt bigger game seems to be paying off, as he has managed to secure both rabbit and ptarmigan.
There is no way to keep going, because then you're just wasting away. If you don't have the mental capacity to stay true to your... Pretty yummy. Chunk of liver. Oh, whoa. Blast. Yeah, it's gonna be chilly tonight.
Back to Callie, renewed by the sunlight, she set out to check her traps again. Before reaching them, a ptarmigan appeared, offering an unexpected opportunity. She carefully approached and shot it from a tree, achieving her first successful kill.
It happened. Oh, I can't believe this.
Delighted, Callie processed the chicken by the shore and prepared a pot of chicken and seafood stew. After simmering for half an hour, the delicious meal bolstered her spirits, renewing her determination to continue.
Look.
Wanya plans to trap larger game after hearing something moving on her roof at night, sounding like a fox digging. Deciding to set traps nearby, she reasoned that catching a fox would be as valuable as several rabbits, making her 50-day survival much easier. Considering how cunning foxes are, simple traps and baits won't catch them. Wanya first creates an enclosed area with branches, leaving only a small entrance for the fox. She places the rabbit organs she saved earlier inside and secures a noose at the only entrance. Now, she can just wait for a fox to fall for it. Late at night, A scream is heard from the trap. Juania wanted to check immediately but couldn't find her headlamp. She thought it would be okay to wait until morning, but by then she discovered the trap only caught the fox's leg, and, unexpectedly, it chose to amputate its leg to escape. It likely didn't get far, so Juania started a thorough search but found nothing within 100 meters. It seems she can only hope another fox gets caught, or for the injured one to return. By day 16, frost has started forming on the island's vegetation, and snow seems imminent. Before it sets in, contestants need to stock up on food. Michelle spends each day foraging and checking traps, hoping for protein sources beyond mussels. While bending to collect berries, she finds a rabbit in one of her traps. Unlike Callie and Juania, who get visibly excited about their catches, Michelle remains calm, quickly preparing the rabbit for cooking right there, turning it into a wilderness feast.
Just let this boil. Liver's so weird. And the heart.
Callie remains optimistic, even as frost covers the landscape. Sitting by the sea, drinking tea, and watching the ice move, she seems unfazed by the potential food shortage. Seeing seals play in the water, she decides to build a large fishing trap. Her area lacks deep water, making fishing unlikely, but a trap might just work. Not expecting much, she'd be satisfied with a small fish a day. After weaving a fishing net from paracord, she constructs a frame with vines and sticks, then wraps the net around it. The trap almost complete. Callie can't wait to try it out. However, with such a large opening, the trap needs a funnel-shaped entrance to prevent fish from escaping. Callie carves spikes around the rim and hangs ptarmigan organs inside as bait. When the tide rises, the trap will be fully submerged, requiring weights to keep it down. To attract fish, Callie even performs a spirited dance. Back to Juania, she plans to upgrade her shelter as the temperature drops, anticipating soon being covered in snow. She digs a large pit for a fireplace and heads to the beach to select stones, avoiding those that absorb moisture and could explode when heated. After several trips, she chooses granite, using it to build sturdy, fireproof pillars filled with clay. She places a large flat stone on top for cooking and constructs a chimney, necessary for proper ventilation. After cutting an opening in the roof and securing it with wood, she continues to stack stones, ensuring the chimney is taller than the shelter for effective smoke exhaust. Once completed, Juania tests her luxurious wilderness fireplace, and it works perfectly. By day 18, Amos is back to collecting mussels. Although not a substantial food source, they are necessary since his bear hunting plans are yet to succeed and traps often return empty. After a fruitless half-day in the woods and finding no ptarmigan, he spots bear tracks but ends up empty-handed, guessing the bear is as hungry as he is and also out searching for food. Realizing continuing the search is a waste of energy, he heads home to eat seaweed and mussels. The crackling campfire reminds him of a past season when he accidentally set a fire before leaving, which everyone thought was intentional, much like sparks that unexpectedly jump.
No.
Today is Callie's 19th day in the competition. The first thing she did upon waking was check her traps, but both the bird snare and the noose were empty, including her most anticipated fishing trap. Relying on the sea yet unable to catch fish is frustrating, leaving her to continue eating seaweed and mussel stew. While this sustains her short term, it's hard on her stomach and taste buds. Indeed, at 3 a.m., Callie suffered severe vomiting and diarrhea throughout the night. By morning, walking was a struggle due to severe dehydration, posing a life-threatening situation. While others might have called for rescue, Callie persisted, determined not to be defeated by mussels, similar to Juania, who, aside from eating a rabbit and a ptarmigan, also relied mostly on seaweed and mussels. Juania's previously stored mussels are nearly depleted, prompting her to restock during low tide. She filled her breeding pool to the brim, ensuring enough food to last a week. In her spare time, she often hikes to the mountains to set traps and gather the remaining berries. Meanwhile, Amos might dislike mussels, focusing instead on hunting. However, he's not catching meat, and his hair is falling out from severe malnutrition. Today, his traps were empty again, so he resumed his bear hunt. Unfortunately, he was thwarted by a squirrel. After hesitating, he finally took a shot, only to scare the squirrel away, leaving him demoralized. It's been 5 days without meat, and he feels it might be better just to stay in his shelter. Callie managed to pull through her ordeal but remained weak from dehydration. She decided to smoke herself with herbal smoke, a healing method used by humans for thousands of years. Mussels and seaweed are off the menu for now, and she's too weak to hunt in the mountains, so she depends on her traps. Yet, the ptarmigan trap and snares yield nothing, her expression growing increasingly fixed with repeated disappointments. Without a new source of protein, the $1 million prize seemed out of reach until her expression suddenly brightened. It seems her trap caught something. Although a squirrel doesn't offer as much meat as a rabbit, it's certainly better than starving. Callie quickly skinned and stewed the entire squirrel, needing a substantial meal to recover. After his hunting failures, Amos has been despondent, staying inside to carve wooden spoons, planning to give them to his mother when he returns home. The 7th season took a heavy toll on him, requiring a long recovery. Facing harsh conditions and scarce resources, he decided to withdraw from the competition, choosing health over the $500,000 prize. Raising a child requires money, but presence is more crucial. Going home early seemed the wisest choice, leaving all male contestants eliminated this season. The 3 remaining female contestants continue to endure. Michelle even finds time for crafts, pulling lots of seaweed at the beach and using fish hooks and lines to secure it. Initially, it seemed she was making a fruit bowl, but it turned out more like a basket. After Wonia added feathers, it resembled a hat. Its actual use might just be to pass the time. Today is Wonia's 21st day in the competition. If she can last another 29 days, she will win the prize money. With a shelter and fireplace already set up, her focus is now solely on gathering food. She finds the sea's offerings easier to collect than land animals like rabbits, so she forages the shore at every low tide, occasionally discovering new species such as small invertebrates, which are much more valuable than seaweed and mussels. After filling 4 pots with mussels, she found only 3 sea urchins and couldn't resist eating one immediately after cracking its shell open. It was incredibly satisfying. To her surprise, she found a nest of sea urchins while collecting more mussels. Each sea urchin contains about 4 grams of fat, a crucial resource for survival, and together with mussels, they could sustain her for at least a week. Over to Michelle. Today is significant, as she withdrew from Season 8 on this day, having lost significant weight. This time, she prioritized hunting and foraging, leading to a smaller weight loss of only 13 pounds so far. While checking her traps, a ptarmigan unexpectedly crossed her path. Michelle followed cautiously and landed a precise shot, her archery skills proving superior as she leads in poultry kills. After preparing the bird, she started a fire to cook, showing off her slim waist while waiting, demonstrating an effective weight loss method. Just as she was enjoying her meal, another ptarmigan appeared, but she missed this one, unfortunately. By day 24, Labrador is covered in heavy snow. Callie is excited because snow reveals animal tracks, aiding in hunting and trap setting. However, after checking her traps, she found them all empty. It seems she'll have to settle for seal oil and bone stew, as her only significant catch in the last 10 days was a small squirrel. With little else to show, she gives a tour of her shelter, displaying neatly arranged pelts, a chair, tools, firewood, and weapons, with a bed and stone fireplace completing a perfect living environment, except for the sparse food supply. As the temperature drops to -4 degrees Celsius, Wonia plans to open her trap-blind boxes and look for animal tracks nearby. Snow benefits hunting but makes resource gathering difficult, especially for firewood. After emptying several traps without hope, she turned around to a pleasant surprise, a rabbit, which is hard to catch as they rarely venture out without snow cover. Having caught 2 this month, Wonia might be the luckiest contestant. While waiting for the rabbit to cook, she enjoyed some sea urchin and mussels, the satisfaction indescribable. The substantial rabbit leg was devoured thoroughly, followed by a nourishing broth that revitalized her body and spirit. Michelle is doing well, having eaten a chicken a couple of days ago. The quiet of the night is the hardest, often filled by crafting to alleviate loneliness and hunger. Michelle has carved 4 chess pieces, with plans to create a board once she carves all the pieces, marking her victory. On day 25, lacking food, Callie's emotional and physical state deteriorates. Tonight, she plans to sleep under the stars and northern lights, hoping nature's beauty will heal her spirit despite the sub-zero temperatures. This risky act is a desperate attempt to satisfy either her body or soul. Meanwhile, Wonia finds that the stream has frozen, and gathering berries is a stroke of luck. Taking advantage of the clear weather, She intended to cut some tinder but accidentally cut her finger. Even though the wound isn't severe, she must be cautious due to frequent contact with animal carcasses and the risk of infection from open wounds, exacerbated by the cold and malnutrition, which could slow healing and potentially force her out of the competition. Callie emerged from her sleeping bag again to find everything frosted over. It was time to consider whether to stay or leave. If her traps on land, sea, and air all came up empty, she'd have to give up the challenge and the substantial prize. She could endure hunger, but the physical toll was too great. The frostbite from Season 7 was still vivid in her memory, and she wasn't willing to trade her health for wealth. After finding nothing in her land and air traps, she pinned her last hopes on the fish basket. Due to the low temperatures, the surface of the water had frozen, and the rope and basket were solidly frozen. Callie had to break the ice with a rock. As the basket slowly surfaced, her heart sank to rock bottom. Even a small fish would have kept her going, but the basket was empty. Her last hope vanished, and after much hesitation, she made the call to quit the competition. Her strength was evident to all. It was just bad luck this time. If she could still stomach mussels, maybe she could have persisted. She remains the optimistic Callie, now with a greater appreciation for her health. After Callie's departure, only 2 contestants remained, and the competition heated up. Today is Wania's 28th day. She found fox droppings near her camp, guessing it was from the fox that previously escaped. Its return to mark its territory showed boldness. The noose at the trap's entrance had been moved, and the bait inside was gone, indicating the fox had figured out the trap. Simply resetting the old traps wouldn't work, so Wanya decided to double down. She restored the original noose and added a new passage with a differently colored noose. If the first was pushed aside, the second would catch it. After setting this up and reinforcing the trap with branches, she waited for the fox to fall for it. The next morning, Wanya rushed to check the trap without even putting on her pants and found the fox had indeed been caught. In many seasons of Alone, foxes often outsmarted contestants, but this time, one had been outsmarted. Although not as large as musk ox or elk, the fox was the biggest catch of the season. If Michelle didn't make a new breakthrough, Wanya was on track to win. After processing the meat, she decided to try the fox's eggs first, known for their high nutritional value, including protein, cholesterol, and minerals. Paired with the heart, kidneys, and fat, this meal could recover over 20 days of deficiencies. The only concern was parasites, which could lead to infection if not cooked properly. Meanwhile, Michelle was struggling. Closing her eyes only brought visions of various foods. It had been days since her last chicken meal. Before heading out to check traps, she ate some mussels to boost her energy, as her frail body was prone to sickness. Gaining weight before the competition would have made surviving 50 days much easier. Despite her constant hunting, her weight had dropped rapidly, now barely over 90 pounds. If she couldn't control her weight loss, the production team might have to pick her up soon. After eating 130 mussels and 50 clams, providing about 1,500 calories, she began checking her traps. With no animal tracks in the snow, her bow and arrow were useless. Unfortunately, several traps were empty, worrying her about the days ahead. Then she found a rabbit in one of the traps. Usually calm with her catches, this time she cried tears of joy, showing how precious the rabbit was. It was not just food, but a morale booster. Desperate for nourishment, Michelle quickly skinned the rabbit and decided to eat the kidneys first for their nutrients. On day 30, Wanya took out her spoils, determined to maximize her resources. Not only could she scrape fat from the fur, but once cleaned, it could also provide warmth. She smoothed one end of a log and wedged it between small trees to create a simple scraping beam. The scraping had to be done with moderate force to avoid damaging the outer fur. The process generated heat and pressure, turning the fat to liquid, which could be preserved for a month at room temperature. After cleaning the fat from the fur, it made a very warm scarf. For the past 2 days, it has been continuously snowing. Wanya, apart from fetching water from the lake, spends her time lying in the shelter. The lakeside has become steep and slippery after the snow, and with the current temperatures, falling into the water could incapacitate someone in just 3 minutes. For safety, she built steps with stones. However, as she was preparing to head back after fetching water, a blizzard started up again. With the unpredictable winter weather, Wanya had no choice but to return to her shelter and lie down. Michelle's situation was less comfortable. Despite the heavy snowfall, she had to go out to forage. The rabbit caught 2 days ago wouldn't last long, especially in this cold environment where calorie consumption is much higher. After spending half a day in the woods and finding her dozens of traps empty without any signs of grouse or rabbits, she finally encountered a small squirrel, but failed to catch it. Squirrels are not her preferred prey due to their small size and quick movements. Luckily, the next day, she encountered the squirrel again, and, after several rounds, it did not escape her sight. Ultimately, she managed to catch it and decided to make a hearty soup with it right away. The satisfaction of tasting fresh meat was indescribable. The blizzard lasted several days, with the felt temperature dropping to -18 degrees Celsius. During this time, Michelle continued to check her traps, but always returned empty-handed. Wanya also checked her traps, most of which were buried under the snow, showing she hadn't ventured out much. After clearing the traps, she was soaked and hurried back to her shelter to warm up by the fire, steaming like a freshly cooked chicken. Today is day 34 of the challenge. After several days of blizzard, Michelle could no longer bear it. She needed to check her traps, partly due to extreme hunger, and partly because her shelter lacked proper ventilation, risking carbon monoxide poisoning. After checking the traps and finding them still empty, she was prepared to starve. However, a grouse suddenly appeared, and Michelle immediately shot at it. Surprisingly, the grouse seemed to dodge the arrow, but Michelle, determined not to let this walking jackpot escape, chased it down, finally capturing and stunning it. Michelle, moved by the grouse that saved her life, couldn't help but salivate and decided it deserved a proper send-off, integrating its spirit with her own. After consuming a big leg and a restorative soup, she felt reinvigorated and ready to continue. Over at Wanya's side, she had sealed her shelter very tightly to cope with the blizzard, giving it a bit of a burrow feel. She decided to install a door frame on the shelter, guessing that the strength from the fox meat was helping her undertake such construction in this harsh environment. Although it wasn't a big project, it burned a lot of calories, enough to justify lying in the shelter for a few more days. With the current felt temperature at -10 degrees Celsius, not having a door was like asking for trouble, so she worked overtime to make a wooden door. Now, with both warmth and food secured, she planned to use a new strategy. While hoping to catch rabbits with her traps, she still had mussels as a backup, which could sustain her for many more days. Seeing most traps covered in snow, Wanya wasn't hopeful, but ended up finding one anyway. Not sure if it was caught, she swung her axe in a practiced move, confirming the rabbit's foot was caught in the trap. With the current situation, winning the season seemed likely for her. On day 37 of the survival challenge, the blizzard showed no signs of stopping. Michelle's biggest issue was not hunger, but the thick smoke from heating that couldn't escape. Her eyes had become red and swollen. She hoped sleep would improve things, but by the next morning, the situation worsened. Attempts to rinse her eyes with water were ineffective. More seriously, her vision became very blurry, and she could only see out of half of her left eye. Michelle realized the severity of her condition. Continuing like this could result in losing her eyesight. In the current freezing conditions, not making a fire would lead to frostbite within about 30 minutes, which could worsen her eye condition. The smoke from coniferous trees contains high levels of acid, damaging to the throat and eyes. After a fierce internal debate, Michelle chose to withdraw from the competition. Although the $500,000 prize was tempting, it couldn't buy health. After hanging up the phone, she felt relieved. Michelle knew she wasn't the strongest, but she had done what she wanted to do. Not winning the prize didn't mean failure. Pushing her limits was her real success. Compared to surviving on grass for 21 days in Season 9, this time she was definitely a competent hunter and a qualified wilderness soloist. With Michelle's departure, Wanya would be the season's winner under normal circumstances. However, this season's rules were different. One must last 50 days to be declared a winner. With just over 10 days to go, Wanya also experienced issues. The strong winds caused smoke backdraft, leaving her dizzy, headachy, and with red, blurry eyes similar to Michelle. But Wanya believed as long as it wasn't life-threatening, nothing could stop her progress. Her strategy was to extinguish the fire and crawl into her sleeping bag for a few days. By day 40, things improved. It no longer made sense to keep lying down, so she decided to try ice fishing on the lake. Catching a fish would be ideal, but if not, it would at least add content for editing. After breaking through the ice and setting up the fishing line with squirrel organs as bait, she fished from morning until evening with no luck. Rather than freeze in the harsh conditions, she preferred to lie and win in her shelter. As the challenge neared its end, the days seemed longer for Juania. Besides chopping wood and fetching water, she spent most of her time lying in the shelter, pushing herself to the brink of mental and physical collapse. Finally, she made it to day 50. To commemorate this significant moment, she built an Inuit cairn and anxiously awaited the crew's arrival. Juania hadn't seen another person in a long time, and the loneliness, bitterness, and grievances of 50 days were finally vented. As Juania spoke nonstop, her husband emerged from behind. Thus, the Wilderness Solo Special episode concluded. Juania not only proved herself by being the last contestant standing this season, but also became the first female champion in the show's history. The $500,000 prize was truly well-deserved.